The Vegan Gains Superhuman Dance debate about antinatalism and associated topics occurred on Thursday, March 28th. Ask Yourself also joined the debate, but offered no position on antinatalism. Big surprise. So I'll just ignore that part. Whatever you think about Superhuman Dance's debating strategy, I'll leave that for you to judge. My only comment would be that all of us vegan antinatalists should try to live by a rule that I use for this channel, and that's keep it simple, stupid. In Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler said, "You have to aim your argument at the stupidest person who may be listening." Unfortunately, he also thought that meant it's okay to lie and manipulate those stupid people into accepting your position. But what I get out of that famous quote is that you should be aiming your arguments at a child. Like an elementary school-aged child who understands English, who has a basic vocabulary, but has never read a book by Schopenhauer. They don't know what a negative utilitarian is, but they have lived long enough to know the concepts of good and bad. You really have to aim that low, in my opinion. I noticed some confusion in the comments section and in the debate itself. When it comes to the art of argument, I personally try to emulate the two Garys, Gary Inmendham and Gary Yourofsky. Their language is dead simple, and within their arguments they have already considered all of the counter-arguments. I especially find value in Inmendham's many famous metaphors, like life being a gas pump for your car with 1,000 holes in the hose. It's not efficient in any way, it's dangerous, and it's a waste. Superhuman Dance has made some good metaphors in the past as well. I think those are key. Gary Yourofsky is famous for one video in particular that is such a tight, well-ordered, well-refined argument that as soon as someone might be thinking, "Yeah, but what about," he immediately goes into that counter-argument. Vegan Gains has said that that video turned him vegan. Literally millions of people now say the same thing. That's the power of a well-made argument. The part where he takes questions, or has a series of mini-debates if you will, is even better. Because veganism and antinatalism have no valid counter-arguments, any person who can do 2 + 2 can get it. So let's dive into Superhuman Dance versus Vegan Gains, and see if we can find out why Richard does not accept the conclusion that it is better never to have been.
So my main problem with Benatar's, this Benatar table, it's that you may not just necessarily agree with it, and I don't personally agree with it. I'd say that the amount of possible well-being that we could achieve would far outweigh any suffering we could achieve, at least in the future. I think overall, at least for humanity, things are improving, and the future does potentially look good for us.
Not even sure what to call this fallacy, where one just says, "I don't like your argument." But then he does go on and commits the optimism fallacy. According to Exploring the Causes of Comparative Optimism, there are 4 factors that can cause someone to be optimistically biased: their desired end state, their cognitive mechanisms, the information they have about themselves versus others, and their overall mood. The desired end state is a common one. Richard's end state is probably something like orgasms. If you never existed, then you have no end state that results in orgasms. Richard's bias is very common. He's probably thinking of diluted books like It's Getting Better All the Time, which try to give evidence that life is improving for everyone. So this line of argument is not just guilty of an optimism bias, but also a selection bias. It's like doing a study on cancer by selecting people without cancer. Or in Richard's case, he's using his own anecdotal evidence of a life without extreme pain, suffering, loss, and disease, and using that as a blanket statement, that life can be good for everyone, even animals who are getting their faces ripped off in nature at this very moment, the over 2 million Americans who are rotting in prison, all of the people who are born in sewers like India and Bangladesh every day. I could go on, demonstrating that things are not getting better, they are getting far worse for us. The only beings whose situations are improving are the ones going extinct. But the main problem is that he's projecting the fact that he likes being alive on everyone. Okay, so I don't like being alive very much personally. How does the fact that you like smelling and eating shit help me? My parents thought that a stinking cesspool was a good place to raise a child, and they were wrong. Richard is still very young. He still hasn't had to deal with significant loss and misery yet. If If his wife got cancer and slowly died over a period of years, obviously he wouldn't think this place is so fucking amazing. This is the same bullshit that meat eaters use to justify holocausting animals. Hey, I'm okay, so what if that other guy had to suffer a miserable life and a miserable death?
At least, you know, if we're going to ask like certain individuals whether or not the amount of suffering they've endured makes it so their life isn't worth living, I'd say most people would tell you, well, no, even though I suffer, I experience enough pleasure where my life is worth living. So, like, for you to claim like one orgasm doesn't equate to one death,
Right.
I'd say it's not really a fair comparison.
This is a classic appeal to popularity. Most people like bacon, therefore we should allow them to torture and murder innocent animals while ignoring the welfare of those victims. I'm really surprised he didn't see this obvious contradiction.
Okay, so you're asking me to describe the state of being that would define infinite like pleasure
Yes.
and no pain. Okay, like I don't know. Let's say we're like living in a computer simulation where it's impossible for us to like feel pain in the simulation, and everything feels like a constant 100% orgasm, like the most, and like you have a constant taste in your mouth where it's like the most delicious cake you've ever had. Just something like that, where I think most people would say like, okay, the feeling of a constant 100% orgasm infinitely with like the best taste in your mouth possible, and you never feel any amount of pain, suffering, whether it be physical or psychological.
Vegan Gains mentions this scenario a lot. First thing I would say is that infinite is not a good word to use. Everything is finite, even the number of atoms in the universe. Secondly, I assume Richard has watched The Matrix. What happened when the robots gave us that exact experience? We rejected it because suffering is built into our DNA. You can't just have constant pleasure without pain. One without the other doesn't even make any logical sense. It's the yin and yang thing. How would you have any concept of night without day? How would you know what pleasure is without pain? The brain would constantly seek out discomfort because that is its natural state. So Vegan Gains claims that he is a negative utilitarian. And I will say that it's nice to see someone admit that everyone's ethics are basically negative utilitarian, because it makes obviously more sense to prioritize the prevention of harm rather than trying to increase happiness or pleasure. Like, airbags in cars aren't there so you can have a nice cushy pillow and take a nap, for example. They're there to prevent your neck from snapping. But he also appears to be a natalist transhumanist like David Pierce. So Richard's desire for planet Earth is that we all live in virtual reality with constant orgasms 24/7. He didn't mention the fate of the animals, though, in this scenario. Are we going to jack in every dog, rat, or blue jay into the Matrix? It's not practical, and he can't give a reason why this is better or more productive than just never coming into existence. Is that really the fate we want for ourselves and other sentient animals? Just be a meat sack masturbating on a toilet chair like an idiocracy? Even if David Pierce is right that future technology can reprogram our brains to be satisfied constantly, that existence seems really undignified. Although in the short term I definitely see the value of it, but he's just not seeing this all the way to its conclusion. In virtual reality, we could each have our own utopia. Muslims could have a harem of virgins, Christians could be best friends with Jesus, and antinatalists can live in the world of children of men if they want to. Clearly virtual reality has the capacity to reduce some suffering for some humans, but it's a band-aid at best. Contraception and abortion could start reducing suffering significantly today if everyone started to accept the truth that life sucks.
So you mentioned, like you said something along the lines of pleasure is just like different levels of pleasure are just certain levels of pain or suffering avoidance. So like okay, a blowjob, for instance, it's less like, to you it's not like necessarily pleasurable, it's just that you have a greater amount of pain avoidance than not receiving a blowjob. Or having anal is like a greater level of pain avoidance than having a blowjob. It's basically less pain, less pain for you, rather than more pleasure, more pleasure, more pleasure.
It's not that sexual satisfaction is suffering avoidance, it's the sexual urge that is suffering, and a need that needs to be satisfied. That's all pleasure is. It's like going to the bathroom and relieving yourself of your body's waste products. It feels good because that need has been met for the time being. Same with eating or any of these biological needs. I think this is a good time to break out a visual aid. I'll just do this in real time so I don't have to render anything. So this is the moral landscape popularized by Sam Harris. Pleasure is a peak or a mountain and pain and suffering are valleys. So, say your car breaks down, this can be a very traumatic thing for someone who is employed. If you don't have transportation, you can't get to work, you can't make money, you can't buy food. Now say a nice person gifts you a new car. You'd probably be pretty happy about that. So this is what that experience looks like to a classical utilitarian. But they're forgetting something, aren't they? You first started with the deprivation. So when your suffering is relieved, you don't get to create a skyscraper on the moral landscape. You're just out of the hole until that car breaks down and you're down again. Now he might say, okay, but what if you have a car that is reliable transportation, but someone gifts you a better one with better gas mileage and a backup camera? He might think, now I can rise above sea level, this neutral state, into a positive state of quote-unquote well-being. But that still doesn't work because it's ignoring the negatives you had with your first car. That it got poor gas mileage, it didn't have a backup camera, increasing the odds of you running someone over, etc. So you're still down here. You're always down in the valley. This is what pleasure actually looks like. You occasionally feel satisfied, like after eating a tasty vegan meal, but within moments that starts to go away and hunger returns. Or you would love to keep eating, but you're either out of food, or you're burdened by the knowledge that too much food will make you fat and unhealthy. You just can't win at this life game.
Even if you can't accept that, and even I like on some level I don't accept that either, just because I think everybody has their own like agency essentially. So I would say existence is something that's unavoidable. I think you will inevitably exist, whether we all kill ourselves or not. I think eventually life will start back up again. Through abiogenesis somewhere, like in some part of the universe. So I'd say existence is inevitable, and whether or not somebody chooses to have kids, and even if you resent your parents for having you, your existence was inevitable.
I mean, in a way, he is right. Every new person born is another me. But once sentient DNA replication is wiped out on Earth, we've done all we can realistically do. I mean, we're not going to come back. I, like Inmendham, personally do not care for arguments that try to make me concerned about sentient life on other planets in the universe. In other words, we should keep the human flame alive for eons, on the slight chance that 1. Sentient life actually exists somewhere in the galaxy besides Earth. 2. We can detect sentient life on far distant planets. And 3. We can reach said planets in order to terminate sentience there. So far as we know, there is no life outside of the Earth. It is impossible to reach other planets in any kind of practical time frame. I mean, really? We're going to make human generation ships just go from star to star when it takes millions of years to get there? To me, this is not a serious argument. The closest star is nearly 6 trillion miles away. Even if there are sandworms on planet Dune somewhere thousands of light years from Earth, we cannot help them. It's physically impossible. But what is possible is improving conditions on this planet. Even with current technology, we could do it. So that's where the practical argument is. If we wiped out all sentience on Earth, including the insects, the idea that plants would evolve sentience once again before the sun destroys the Earth's atmosphere is a ludicrous assertion. You know, the Earth is almost middle-aged. By the time sentience were to evolve again, even if it were possible to do so, the planet would be fucked by the sun becoming a red giant. But beyond that, it's really most likely that some other event like a supervolcano or asteroid impact would occur before that and it would wipe out all life. If you want to satisfy people who argue this way, you can give them a concession by saying, okay, we can leave robots behind, Terminators, if you will, just in case sentience were to re-emerge. But this argument doesn't counter the fact that preventing birth is a guaranteed win for the unborn.
I don't see this actually mattering because for one thing, we can't actually prove either way whether there is free will or determinism. And even if we could prove that there is such a thing as determinism, would anyone really care?
One of the bottlenecks in this debate came from the topic of determinism. The hashtag Name the Thought didn't seem to click with him, and he has a misunderstanding that free will is actually a thing. We know for a fact that determinism is true, and that free will is an illusion. It's been proven in studies that your consciousness becomes aware of what your brain decided to do up to 10 seconds after the fact. That's all the proof I need that free will does not exist. I'm sure that, like me, some of you have noticed this yourselves. But besides that data, we also know that we exist in a cause and effect universe, and you're really not free to do anything. You're constrained or imprisoned by physical laws, like 2 + 2 = 4. You're not free to ignore that fact. You're not free to be anything other than a flesh robot programmed by natural selection to pass on your genes at the expense of others, and even your own organism. Every stupid little desire you have came from software that you're born with, and the environment where you're shit out into. All criminals have similar backgrounds, as do religious fanatics, politicians, etc. Every so-called choice you ever made was really just a chain of events leading to an inevitable conclusion. Richard then said he doesn't think that it matters if people believe in free will, but it really does. Just how it matters if people believe in gods or not. Belief in free will is not harmless. It can lead to unfortunate consequences, like in the criminal justice system. Punishing people who are clearly just a product of their environment or who have a mental illness is misguided and unproductive. Superhumandance already commented on this. Free will removes the idea of a cause for our behavior. It is a false doctrine like religion. It fails to describe reality accurately. How can you even determine why someone did something or how they'll act in the future if you don't believe in determinism? So that's all I have to say about this debate. Sorry to subject you to more weightlifting footage, especially because all of the cool people who sub to my fitness channel are just going to have to watch it again, but with more context. But also, this is a way for me to show Vegan Gains, if he ever watches this video, that this is how you're supposed to lift weights, not in the rapid, high-volume way that he recommends. But all of his nutrition advice I generally am in agreement with, and we both want liberation for the animals. The only really shady thing was letting a well-known clown ask yourself in at the end, when he contributed absolutely nothing, and his quote-unquote argument just made me laugh. Well, thanks for watching, and keep making those antinatalist gains.